Today on Monson Made This, we are in the vegan kitchen with Kris. We are back with another celebrity recipe. Today we are going to be making Kris Jenner's brownie recipe. Apparently these are amazing. This will be the third time that I've tried to make these, and I have a really strong feeling that today they are going to be good. Additionally, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be creating some videos for my Patreon page. So if you want to follow the link below to that, you can go and subscribe over there. Basically, it's going to be Monson Ate This videos as opposed to Monson Made This videos. So it's going to be just more of kind of like an eating, chatting, and I will be consuming the food that I made in the video, but just having a little bit more of a casual conversation with you about things that are going on and maybe some Q&As. So definitely follow that link to Patreon below and subscribe. But back to these brownie recipes. Now, I don't really love to bake. I don't think I'm that great at baking. So why did I take on these brownie recipes, which are clearly baked? Well, I had seen this recipe when I originally looked through this cookbook, which I don't know if you can see that I've dog-eared quite a few pages here of recipes that I wanted to make. But actually looking at reviews of this book ahead of time too, people had said that the brownie recipe is solid in here. And then when Kourtney Kardashian opened up her website Poosh, the very first recipe that she put on there was this brownie recipe. Now, I had seen that this brownie recipe was supposed to be on Poosh, converted to a gluten-free, dairy-free recipe, but it's not. It's the exact same recipe that's in here with just quite a bit less butter added to it, and the serving size from 20 brownies to 30 brownies. So I decided that I was going to make these brownies fully vegan, try a few swap outs, hopefully they work. This is the third time that I've tried this. The other two times worked-ish, but I think they're really gonna be great this time. So let's start getting into the swap outs that I'm gonna be using for this recipe. The first ingredient is pretty common, but sugar. This sugar is from Sprouts, and it actually says on the side here that it's vegan, not made from bone char. So just double check that the sugar that you are getting is a vegan sugar if you want to guarantee that your recipe is vegan. The baker's chocolate, this is actually the specific one that the recipe calls for. It's an unsweetened chocolate. The only ingredient in this is chocolate, so it doesn't even have any sugar, doesn't have any dairy, so it's already vegan. The butter, we're going to be using Miyoko's cultured vegan butter today. Now this is a coconut oil base. I have used coconut oil instead of this vegan butter in other recipes, but I just wanted to make this as true to the original recipe as possible. So I'm going to be using this, and we're going to be using basically half of this container. I found these chocolate chunks at my local Albertsons, which I guess is the same as Vons. I read the ingredients. There are no dairy ingredients. The sugar on here is organic, so I'm gonna call this as a vegan ingredient. And the last thing is actually the wild card for this particular batch. It is the Just Egg. I have spent 2 batches trying to figure out the best egg substitute because the recipe calls for 4 full eggs. So I've talked to a few different people, talked to Jackie from Vegan Yak Attack, and most recently I talked to Timmy from the Mississippi Vegan, and he says that he thinks this would work in this recipe, so he made a quiche work with the Just Egg, so I'm assuming that I can make a brownie work with this as well. So this is pretty much the swap outs that we need, or the specific ingredients that are vegan. Other than that, we basically just have flour, some baking powder, and some salt, as well as vanilla extract, which are all already vegan. So let's start assembling. The first thing that we are told to do is to melt the butter and then to melt the baking chocolate into that. So we're gonna use this entire bar. I've already broken it up, and I've already melted this butter on the stove. So I'm just gonna drop it in here. If it doesn't seem like it's melting that well, I might put it on the stove for a little bit, but the idea is that the heat from the butter that's already melted is going to melt the chocolate as well, and then we're gonna get a nice creamy chocolate sauce when we're done with this. So I'm gonna set this aside, and we'll get the dry ingredients ready. To a small bowl, I'm going to add 1 cup of flour, and I'm going to add some salt and baking powder. And I'm just gonna mix this up just so that when I do add this to the wet ingredients later, it's all uniform. Now I'm noticing that my chocolate isn't melting that well, so what I'm going to do is actually put it onto the stove and help it out a little bit. The chocolate is melted into the butter, and now we are ready to work on the wet ingredients. So we are going to be basically pouring this chocolate sauce into a bowl, mixing in the sugar, adding our vegan egg, and some vanilla. So let's start adding the chocolate to the bowl. Next, the directions say to add the sugar to the chocolate and butter mixture. And then we're going to whisk this together. A sugar cloud though. Once this is incorporated, we are going to be adding our vegan egg, which I'm going to be using just egg. And it says to add 1 egg at a time, so I'm gonna try to do this 3/4 of a cup here into 4 batches. Beautiful. Now it's time to add our dry ingredients. Just kidding, we're not adding the dry ingredients just yet because I forgot to add the vanilla. I'm loving the way that this looks, like it's so velvety and smooth. Like I said, this is the 3rd time I've tried this, and it hasn't looked this good before, so maybe the just egg is just what we needed. We have the dry ingredients from earlier, so this is the flour, the salt, and the baking powder. And we're just gonna add this to the wet ingredients. And mix this up. Once I get this all incorporated, then I'm going to add the chocolate chips and some chopped walnuts. I added the chocolate chunks and the walnuts to the batter and mixed it up. And then in this baking sheet, it's a 9x13 baking sheet, I added a little bit of the Miyoko's butter to the base and then put a piece of parchment paper in here. Trust me, you do want to use the parchment paper. The first batch that I tried, it was a nightmare. So anything that's going to help you get this off of the pan is your friend. So please use parchment paper. So the more you know. Let's pour the batter in. My My oven is preheated to 325 Fahrenheit, which is what Kris's book calls for. It's supposed to bake for 20 to 25 minutes, which seems so short considering how large this is. And I don't know how 4 eggs in a thing this size are supposed to cook in that amount of time. But in doing research I did on various brownie recipes, they always say to take it out when the recipe says to do so, especially when it's a fudgy brownie like this one is supposed to be. So I'm just gonna trust that it all works. I'm putting this in 325 Fahrenheit, 25 minutes, and we'll check it when it comes out. Hopefully it's done. So we're actually at about the 33-minute mark. I know I said that everything I read about brownies was to take them out when the time said, but it was a puddle. There's no way that they would have ever come together at that point. So I'm allowing them to keep going. I've tested them with a toothpick like Kris's recipe suggested. It's a puddle. Now I said Mississippi Vegan was the one that suggested using, or I asked him about the just egg and he said it might work. Looking at his recipe for quiches that use the just egg, the time is 60 minutes for a pie. So I'm gonna let these go a little bit longer. Stuff seems to be happening here, so I'll keep you posted. All right, I took it out of the oven after 45 minutes. If you can see here, it's still moving. Now this is no shade at Kris Jenner's recipe, nor just egg. It just might not be a recipe that can be done. Ben's telling me to put it back into the oven. I'm a little bit cautious, so I guess the only thing to do is to put it back into the oven for a few more minutes. Say a prayer. So I'm gonna put this back in for a few more minutes and then pull it again, and maybe it'll end up solidifying as it rests. So it's going back in. Okay, they have been back in for 5 more minutes. I'm pulling them now. I'm just gonna hope that they set up. I did make a batch. The second batch that I made was made with coconut milk as my egg substitute. And if these are just a complete failure, I'll let you know when I've given these times to, when I've given this time to set up to see if it works. But I'll let you know what I did with those. And again, it worked, but feeling a little defeated. So I'll see you back here in probably about an hour. I'm gonna make some breakfast burritos, not mess those up, and we'll see how these brownies go. This brownie recipe is taking forever. In the end, I think we ended up having it in the oven for close to an hour, and I took it out, let it hang out on the counter for a bit, and then it's been in the refrigerator for probably the last 45 minutes. So, doesn't look terrible. It's not jiggly. I'm sure it could probably hang out a little bit more in the fridge, but I'm ready to just give these a try. So I'm gonna cut in. Like I said, the original recipe in the book said that this serves 20, so I'm gonna cut some smaller pieces here to try. Already I can tell it's just super soft, although the knife is coming out fairly clean. All right, moment of truth. It looks like it held together pretty well. Now it is still very warm and it has been in the fridge for about 45 minutes, but I think that if it were to hang out in the fridge a little bit longer, it would maybe hold up a little bit better even. So let's give it a taste. It is so good though, it's so rich. It's a little bit soft. I don't know if it's undercooked or if it's just because the recipe had 4 whole eggs in it that it's just hard to find a vegan equivalent of that, but yeah, it's delicious. So, I mean, definitely give it a try if you want. You just have to double the cooking time, and I would maybe even suggest going up to 350 instead of keeping it at 325. I did mention that I had another version of this recipe that I made. Pretty much everything was exactly the same, except instead of using the just egg, I used 3/4 of a cup of coconut milk, full fat coconut milk, and 2 tablespoons of flax meal. That came out pretty well. The only thing is that it's kind of something that needs to stay in the fridge because if it gets sits at room temperature too long, it starts to get a bit soft, but the flavor is great. I think this one actually might be a little bit better. Again, the jury's still out a little bit on this because it is still pretty warm. Kris Jenner says you could eat it fresh out of the pan, but I don't think there's a brownie recipe that you could do that with. So I'm gonna say goodbye here. I'm gonna finish eating this over on my Patreon channel, and that's something I'm gonna be doing every week, is just kind of an after show. Lots of great reality shows have a after show to just give you some more information. That's what's gonna be happening over there. So if you want, follow me over there, subscribe, and you'll see some Monson ate this videos and just a little bit more casual, laid back discussion style videos, and I'll eat the food that I made in the other recipe videos. So thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this. I'll be back next week. Could be another one of my recipes, could be another celebrity recipe video. Not sure yet, but you have a great week and I'll see you then.